Hi, guys. So let's go over the residential listing agreement. So this agreement was updated June 15th of 2026. This is created by the Texas Realtors, and this is our contract to help you sell your house. So paragraph one, we would enter your information there. My information is here with my company, legal description, and also street address. Improvements and accessories. So anything that's permanently attached to the house and anything that was specially made for the house stays. The biggest thing to note here is the TV brackets and accessories for pool, water softener, garage door openers. The stove is considered permanently attached, so it does stay with the house. And then if you have any kind of smart equipment that's nailed down or bolted down, that would also stay. So you would have to clear your account information and then give the logins into the login information to the new homeowner. If you wanted to keep anything specific, we would enter it here. So we would have to let the buyer know ahead of time. If it's part of an homeowners association, we would check it here. This is the list price that we agree to start, the starting price for sale for the property. This is the start date of our contract, end date of our contract. If you sign a contract to sell to sell your house before this date begins, then our agreement is void. Now, it's important to say after this National Association of Realtors settlement that commissions are negotiable. Okay, every agent charges different fees based on the services they provide. I charge 3% commission. All right. Now, you can also negotiate what you pay the buyer's agent if you decide to pay them at all, but you create a lot more negotiating power and a lot more ability to sell your property by offering a commission to the buyer's agent. Okay. So you're only going to see my side on here. Now, if I do wind up getting a sign call or I do have a buyer for the property, then we'll charge 3% for the work I do on your side on the seller, and then I'm going to charge an additional 2.5% for the buyer side because the work on the buyer side is quite significant. Okay. Now, I am going to suggest that when we market your property for sale, that the biggest incentive to bring in the most amount of buyers is to offer a buyer agent compensation or a agent commission. Okay. I would say that we should probably start at 3%, but we can have a discussion regarding that. And my net sheet would also show that commission for both sides, for both me representing you and for us to incentivize the buyer's agent to bring us a buyer. Because in today's day and age, it's getting much harder for buyers to come in with their down payment, their closing costs, and still having to pay their agent. Okay. It does not happen very often, but it is all negotiable. So that is your right to negotiate that. However, my professional opinion is we want to incentivize as many buyers to come in through that door. And the best way to do it, obviously, is to pay the buyer's agent commission. Okay. Now, you do authorize me to discuss that you will consider contributing to the buyer's expenses, whether it be their closing costs or their agent commission. Okay, again, completely negotiable. All right, now, broker's compensation is earned. My compensation is earned when you sell. Okay, so, and or if you decide you don't want to sell, we get down to the last hour and we're at the closing table and then you decide not to sell. Well, I've already done my job, so therefore I would have to get paid. Now, it's only paid when you sell the house or in the event that I just described where you decide not to pay my commission after I've done the work. And also at the time otherwise set forth in this listing. There's no other place in there. There's one small marketing fee I have, which I'll go over it here in a minute, in the event that we decide to terminate the contract early. Okay. Broker compensation is not payable if you don't close because you couldn't, out of no fault of your own, you couldn't get the title cleared. You got foreclosed on. Something bad happened to the property, like it burned down and you couldn't bring it back up to speed. Okay. Now, if you collect earnest money, the sales price or any damages because you sued, then at that point, after you paid those other fees, then you would owe me a commission. Okay. Seller will pay after deducting attorney fees and collection expenses an amount equal or the lesser of the two, one half of the amount collected after deductions or the amount of my compensation. So let's hope we never have to get there, but that's what the listing agreement says. Now, if I can refer you to people like utility companies, contractors, movers, and I can collect a referral fee. I don't like to do that because then that puts me in the position of feeling responsible for the work that they do. So I've never collected a referral fee from a contractor and I don't plan to. All right. Now, in the event that let's say we're in a month into the contract and you say, you know what, I'm just not going to sell it this time. I want to terminate. We can terminate. However, I do have to recuperate my marketing fees. That's photos, lock boxes, time that I've invested. So there will be a $450 marketing fee. Okay. And also, we do have something called a protection period. So let's say our listing agreement ends. So for 60 days after that, if the buyers that looked at your property during our time we had it up for sale decide to buy the property, you would owe me a commission. Okay. However, I still have to give you a list of those buyers within 10 days after our contract ends. And but this does not apply in the event that you do like let's say you do sell during that protection period, then you would pay me the commission, obviously. Let's say the deal, let's say we're under contract, but our listing agreement expires. You would still, if we're under contract, we would still owe me that commission. Okay, it doesn't go away the minute our listing agreement expires if you are already under contract. If you list with another agent, then you would not owe me a commission. And if you're obligated to pay the other broker a fee for the sale, okay? So if you have another agreement, right? All monies are paid in El Paso County. You authorize the title company to do the closing and to hold earnest money and to pay off your loan once we get funding. If the property is publicly marketed, the MLS, the multiple listing rules say that we are required within 1 day to start publicly marketing the property. So if we start marketing outside, we only have 24 hours to put it in the MLS. Okay. Now, that includes flyers displayed in the windows, yard signs, digital marketing, websites, all that good stuff. Okay. Now, seller instructs now you want me to file it in the MLS. Okay. By the earlier of the time required by the MLS rules or 5 days after this listing agreement begins. So let's say our listing agreement is July 1st, but the house is not ready, right? You need a few days. So I have up to 5 days after that to list it. Now, let's say we get to the point where we realize, you know what, it's going to take another 2 weeks after this starts to get the house ready. So we would put that 2-week date right here, okay? Because you're getting the house ready for sale. Now, MLS rule requires that the broker, me, my company, accurately and timely submit all information. All right. So it's very important that we do that and that we update all the information accurately because other people will need to use that information when they list homes for sale. And that also includes appraisers. They will need to use that information to establish value for other homes. That's an agreement. That's one of the rules that we have for being able to use the MLS. Now, if you decide that you do not want it in the MLS or any other listing service, you have to understand that other people will not be able to find it online. Okay. And that's going to reduce the number of buyers that you're going to have and the ability to sell. So think very hard before you decide to go that route. And we will also have a conversation. Now, if at any point you decided, if at the beginning you decided, I do not want it in the MLS, but then you change your mind and you start advertising it, we have to list it in the MLS within 24 hours or 1 business day. All right, listing content means images, photos, graphics, information, any information I have regarding the property, right? Seller content is what you give me, like the seller's disclosure, any information you have about the property. My content is everything else that I produce that's connected to the listing, right? Seller grants us non-exclusive. We have the right to use the information for the sale of your house forever. Okay. So even if our listing agreement ends, the use of that information does not end. All broker listing content is owned exclusively by the broker, and the seller has no right or interest to any of the listing broker content. For example, if we were to put your house up for sale and you terminated and then you listed with someone else, that agent could not use the photos that I paid for unless I gave written permission. Authorizing access, you authorize access to the property during reasonable times, to other agents, their associates, inspectors, appraisers, or contractors, and you will also provide us with an extra key, okay? Broker may engage, we may use something called Showing Time. It's an app where agents can schedule the showing, and of course, depending on what agreement we have, we can approve those showings. And then you do authorize me to put a lockbox on the property. That makes life 1,000% easier. It'll be much easier to access a property doing that. We can attach the lockbox to the house, or we can give it to you to place out when you leave the house and to bring back in when you're home. That way we never have to worry about anybody entering the house during non-scheduled times, okay? And it'll make it much easier to show, obviously, but I cannot be responsible for unauthorized entry. God forbid somebody breaks into the house, theft, property damage, or personal injury. That's why it's very important to have homeowners insurance. All right, if the tenant occupies the property at any time during if you have a tenant in the house, we need to get written permission from the tenant to be able to put a lockbox on the property, okay? When authorizing access, we are not responsible for any personal injury, property loss to you or to anybody else. You assume the risk, okay? So except for a loss caused by us, right? Something we did wrong. You will hold us, unless we did something wrong, you will hold us harmless and indemnify us from any claims against us for personal injury, damage, or other loss. Paragraph 9, intermediary. So if another agent in my office brings a buyer, then my boss my broker is an intermediary. Each one of us will be assigned to represent each party. Now, if I get a buyer, right, and let's say you don't want me to work with that buyer because you want to make sure, because you just don't feel comfortable me handling both sides of the transaction, then my boss can assign another agent to represent that buyer and give them advice and opinion. Now, the third scenario under something similar would be I get a buyer and I keep the buyer, but I cannot give that buyer advice or opinions. And I have to make sure that I don't disclose any confidential information to them. Okay. I myself personally prefer to work the first scenario where another agent represents the buyer, even if they're, especially if they're working in my office. Okay. Now, if you decide that you don't want intermediary at all, which is the first two of the three scenarios, then that means that you will not sell the property that has a buyer that's represented within my company, which would be incredibly limiting. Okay. Now, remember, if my broker acts as an intermediary, they may not disclose information, like taking a price less or other terms, may not disclose that the buyer will pay a greater price, may not disclose any confidential information unless required by law or made in writing, may not treat any party dishonestly, may not violate the Real Estate License Act. Confidential information stays confidential even after the closing of the sale, unless somebody gives us permission in writing to disclose their information, right? Broker, we will use reasonable efforts to sell the property and get you a buyer. Now, if box 6A1 is checked, you authorize the display of the listing in the internet without limitations. Now, unless you say, I don't want it on the internet, or I don't want the address on the internet. Again, very limiting, right? You do authorize us to look at offers that are conventional, VA, FHA cash, or text vet, unless we discuss otherwise. And according to the MLS rules, we can advertise and information like photos, video, a for sale sign. We can also give buyers a competitive market analysis and sales of other properties in the area to them to provide proof of value. We can provide information that you give us regarding what you know about the property. And we can also obtain any information on any mortgage loan or any lien you have on the property. You allow us to accept and deposit earnest money for the sale, disclose sales price and terms of sale after the closing. And we can respond. We can also let people know if you are considering more than one offer. Of course, we cannot give out terms. We also agree to advertise during the listing as sold and place the information after it closes on the multiple listing service as well. The sales price will not be disclosed publicly. It would only be in our database, in our platform, which is the multiple listing service. We are not authorized to sign any forms on your behalf. You represent that you own the house, that you haven't tried to sell it or rent it to somebody else. You're not bound to another listing agreement to sell, that you keep any pool or spa in compliance with state and local laws. No other person has a right to purchase, lease, or acquire it, or has a first right of refusal to the property. You're current on your mortgages. If you were not, we would enter it here. Also, any HOA fees or any home equity loans you might have. You're not aware of any liens except for, this is where you would probably put your mortgage. You're not subject to the jurisdiction of any court, at least not the property. And all information you provide is true and correct to the best of your knowledge. If this was a relocation situation, we would list the name of the relocation company. We cannot violate or infringe on anybody's rights or anybody's copyright. You are aware that if the property is in a public improvement district or municipal utility district, that you've got to provide that information. Okay. I will probably be able to pull that information up for you once we get to this point and let you know. Or you might already know. You agree to cooperate with the showing and marketing of the sale, not rent or lease during the listing without written agreement, not negotiate with buyers directly, not enter into another listing agreement for the exchange, lease, or management of the property. Check if box 682 is checked, promptly inform broker in the event seller becomes aware that the property has been publicly marketed. So 682, let's go back up here. That you've decided not to list it, but if you decide to start marketing it, you're aware that you promise that we will enter it into you will allow us to enter it into the MLS. Okay. All right. Here we go. Maintain any pool or spa in compliance with local laws. Provide us with copies of leases or rental agreements. Complete any disclosures, okay, that are required by law and amend. So if anything changes with regard to the condition of the property, you need to let us know and we need to put that in writing. If the property becomes vacant, you need to let your insurance know and let them know and request a vacancy clause. If the house goes vacant and you don't let your insurance know, then you need to file a claim. They may deny your coverage and then just and deny the claim as well. Okay, so it's very important. We are not responsible for injury, personal loss of personal property or real estate because of your negligence. Including but not limited to injuries or damage caused by other agents, inspectors, appraisers, contractors that are allowed on the property, other people, other brokers or their associates, yeah, I'm tongue-tied right now, who may have informed the property on their websites, acts of third parties like vandalism, theft, freezing water pipes, dangerous conditions on the property, or if the property is in non-compliance or something that happened because of your negligence. You agree to protect, defend, and indemnify us and hold us harmless for any damages, costs, or attorney fees and expenses that arise because of your negligency or failure to disclose or giving incorrect information to any person. That's why it's very important not to disclose anything. Default, if seller does not cooperate with broker, then you are in default and then you may owe me a commission. Or we can also, if we have a disagreement, we agree to go to mediation first. It's cheaper and it's faster. And if we do go to mediation, we will share in the cost of the mediation. If we do wind up in court, the loser may have to pay the winner's attorney's fees. In addition to this agreement, we are also including information about broker services, which is a different form. The seller's disclosure notice, which should disclose everything you know about the property. Lead-based paint, if it applies, if your house was built before 1978. If it's in a municipal utility district or public improvement district, we would check one of these. A request for mortgage if you still have a loan, and information about property insurance for a buyer and seller. Okay. Also authorization to disclose and advertise certain information. This is an entire agreement. Okay. It cannot be changed unless everybody agrees. Assignability, neither party may assign this listing without written consent of the other person. It is binding upon you and your heirs, administrators, executors, successors, or permitted assignees. If there's two of you, right, then you together and separately are liable for the performance of this contract. Texas law does govern, interpret, and validate the performance of this listing agreement. If the court finds that one part of this contract is not valid, the rest of the contract is still valid. Notices between parties must be in writing. That could be email, fax, you know, anything in writing, or also physical mail, right? This also says that we cannot discriminate against any protected class. This also says that we advise you to contact your mortgage company, to confirm a payoff. We advise you to review the information that we're putting in the MLS. I will send you a draft of it for your approval prior to it going live. We advise you to remove jewelry, prescription drugs, valuables, firearms, or weapons. We advise you to consult with an attorney about any kind of surveillance equipment you have. So cameras, audio, video recording. Okay. Let's see. Sellers should be aware that a buyer might photograph or otherwise record without your knowledge. A lot of times buyers are going to be out of town and the agent needs to go in, or maybe one spouse is there and they want to record. So be aware of that as well. You have to make sure you're in compliance with any statutes or ordinances, like pool or spa or anything like that, maybe even a septic system if it applies to you. If the house was built before 78, there's a good chance that you have lead-based paint. And we have a separate form for that we need you to sign. If you are a foreign national, then we have to let people know. We would check you are or are not a foreign national, because if you are, then the IRS will hold back a portion of your proceeds until you file your income tax returns. Please do not send bank information in an unsecured email. Okay, we want to reduce wire fraud. And you always have the right to consult with an attorney before signing. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help. Bye-bye.